Hello readers, it's Miss Honi. I'm at home today and I'm getting ready for school to start again. I wonder if you're getting ready. Probably some of you have already started school when you watch this video. My school starts in a couple of days and I've been in my classroom getting ready. And the beginning of school brings so many feelings. There are feelings of happiness to be going back and seeing friends and teachers, of course, and connecting again, and maybe sports starting. And there are some feelings of like, wish I was at home a little bit longer, especially on sunny days like today, because we have had very few sunny days. So I just wanted to come and say, feel all the feelings and let's share a great story together. Today is one of my favorite stories. It's called The Quiltmaker's Gift. I don't think I've ever read it on YouTube, but this year I went to a dance show that was inspired by this book, and I love this book. I bought this book for myself. I can tell you what year because I wrote it in the book. In 2001. That was before I had even graduated from college, because I loved it so much. I hope you love it. It's kind of a long story, so settle in. Pause and get a snack if you need to. I kind of need one too, but after. Okay, here it is. The illustrations are, I love them so much. There was once a quilt maker who kept a house in the blue, misty mountains up high. Even the oldest great-great-grandfather could not recall a time when she was not up there sewing away day after day. Here and there, and wherever the sun warmed the earth, it was said that she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. The blues seemed to come from the deepest part of the ocean, the whites from the northernmost snows, the greens and purples from abundant wildflowers, the reds, oranges, and pinks from the most wonderful sunsets. Some said there was magic in her fingers. Some whispered that her needles and cloth were gifts from the bewitched. And still others said the quilts really fell to earth from the shoulders of passing angels. Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to buy one of her wonderful quilts. But the woman would not sell them. "I give my quilts to those who are poor and homeless," she told all who knocked on her door. "They are not for the rich." The Quiltmaker has a very generous spirit. On the darkest and coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town below. There she would wander the cobblestone streets until she came upon someone sleeping outside in the chill. She would take her newly finished quilt from her bag, wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in tight, and tiptoe away. Then the very next morning, with a steaming cup of blackberry tea, she would begin a new quilt. Now at this time, there also lived a powerful and greedy king who liked nothing better than to receive presents. The hundreds of thousands of beautiful gifts he got for Christmas and his birthday were never enough. So a law was passed that the king would celebrate his birthday twice a year. When that still wasn't enough, he ordered his soldiers to search the kingdom for those few people who had not yet given him a gift. Over the years, the king had come to own all of the prettiest things in the world. Throughout the castle, from top to bottom, in drawers and on shelves, in boxes, trunks, and closets and sacks, all of the king's countless things were stashed. That is simply too much. Whoa. Things that shimmered and glittered and glowed. Things whimsical and practical, things mysterious and magical, so many things that the king kept a list of all of the lists of things that he owned. Wow. Little bit of everything. And yet, with all of these marvelous treasures to enjoy, the king never smiled. He was not happy at all. "Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy," he was often heard to say, "and I will have it." One day a soldier rushed to the palace with news of a magical quilt maker who lived in the mountains. The king stamped his foot. "And how is this person never given me one of her quilts as a gift?" he demanded. "She only makes them for the poor, your majesty," the soldier replied. "She will not sell them for any amount of money." "We shall see about that," the king roared. "Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers." And they set off in search of the quilt maker. But when they arrived at her house, the quilt maker merely laughed. "My quilts are for the poor and needy, and I can easily see that you are neither." "I want one of those quilts," the king demanded. "It might be the one thing that will finally make me happy." Ooh, make a prediction. Would a quilt make the king happy? And will the quilt maker give him one? The young woman, not quite young, the older woman, the quilt making woman, thought for a moment. "Make presents of everything you own," she said, "and then I will make a quilt for you. With each gift that you give, I'll sew another piece, and when at last all of your things are gone, your quilt will be finished." "Give away my wonderful treasures," cried the king. "I don't give things away, I take them." And with that, he ordered his soldiers to seize the beautiful star quilt from the quilt maker. But when they rushed upon her, she tossed the quilt out the window, and a great gust of wind carried it up, and away. It is so beautiful. I love this one. The king was now very angry. He marched the woman down through town and up a mountain, where he had his royal iron makers shape a thick bracelet of iron. Then they chained her to a rock in a cave of a sleeping bear. Once more the king asked for a quilt, and once more she refused. "Very well, then," the king replied. "I'll leave you here, and when the bear awakens, I'm sure he will make you a very fine breakfast." Meaning she will be the breakfast. A little scary bear here. Later, when the bear opened his eyes and saw the woman in his cave, he stood on his mighty hind paws and gave a roar that rattled her bones. She looked up at him and sadly shook her head. "It's no wonder you're so grouchy," the quilt maker said. "You have nothing but rocks on which to rest your head at night. Bring me an armful of pine needles and my shawl, and I will make you a great pillow." And that's what she did. No one had ever been so kind to the bear before. So he broke the iron bracelet and asked her to spend the night. Well, happy ending to that story. Now, although the king was very good at being greedy, he was very bad at being mean. All that night he couldn't sleep because he was thinking of the poor woman in the cave. Oh my, what have I done?" he wailed. So he woke up his soldiers, and they all marched in their pajamas to the cave to save her. But when they arrived, the king found the quilt maker and the bear having a breakfast of berries and honey. Delish. Now the king completely forgot about being sorry and became angry again. He ordered the royal island makers to build an island barely big enough for the woman to stand on her tiptoes. Once again, the king asked for a quilt, and once again she said no. "Very well," the king replied. "Tonight, when you are too tired to stand and lie down to sleep, you will drown." And the king left her alone on the tiny island. Shortly after he left, the quilt maker saw a sparrow flying across the great lake. A cold, fierce wind was blowing, and it did not look like the poor bird would make it to shore. The quilt maker called to him, and he stopped to rest on her shoulder. The poor, tired sparrow was shivering, so the woman quickly made him a coat from scraps of her vest. When he was warmed and the wind had stopped, the bird flew off. But he was very grateful to the quilt maker for what she had done. Soon the sky darkened as the air filled with a huge cloud of sparrows. Thousands of wings beating together, they swooped down and lifted the woman in their beaks and carried her safely to shore. Wow. The power of many together. I just love this book. Again that night the king could not sleep, for he was thinking about the woman on the island. Oh my, what have I done?" he moaned. So he woke up his sleepy soldiers again, and they marched in their pajamas down to the lake to see the woman free. But when they arrived, she was sitting on a tree limb, sewing tiny purple coats for all the sparrows. "I give up," the king shouted. "What must I do for you to give me a quilt?" We know, right? He has to give away things. Well, hello, little hornet. You are not here for the story. Oh, there you go. There's another one on my shoulder. "As I said," the woman answered, "give away all the things you own and I will sew a quilt for you." There's a hummingbird behind me. I wonder if it thinks I'm a flower. I will add another piece to your quilt every time you give something away." "I can't do that," cried the king. "I love all of my wonderful, beautiful things." "But if they don't make you happy," the woman replied, "what good are they?" "That's true," the king sighed, and he thought for a long time about what she said, so long that weeks went by. "Oh, all right," he finally muttered. "If I must give away my treasures, I must." The king went to his castle and searched top to bottom for something he could bear to give away. Frowning, he finally came out with a single marble. But the boy who received it smiled so brightly in return that the king went back for more things. Eventually, he brought out a pile of velvet coats and went about the town, giving them to people dressed only in rags. They were so pleased that they marched up and down the street in a grand parade. But still, the king did not smile. Here you can check out him giving away things. Very kind king now, right? Next, the king fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats and a dozen fish that were as clear as glass. Then the king ordered his merry-go-round with the real horses to be brought out. Children cried with delight and cartwheeled around him. And just the smallest of smiles began to show on the king's face. Do you want a close look at him? The king looked about him and saw the dancing and merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts had brought. A child took hold of his hand and pulled him into the dance. Now the king really smiled and even laughed out loud. "How can this be?" he cried. "How can I feel so happy giving away all my things? Bring everything out. Bring it all at once." Meanwhile, the quiltmaker kept her word and started making a special quilt for the king. With each gift that he gave, she added another piece to his quilt. So the king kept giving and giving. When at last there was no one left in town who had not received something, the king decided to go out into the world and find others who might be in need of gifts. But before he left, the king promised the quiltmaker that he would send a sparrow back to her each and every time he gave something away. Morning, noon, and night, the wagons rolled out of town, each piled high with the king's wonderful things. And for years and years, messenger sparrows flew to the quiltmaker's windowsill as the king slowly emptied his wagons, trading his treasures for smiles all around the world. This is like a photo collage quilt of all of the treasures being given out. I don't want to block any. On and on the quiltmaker worked, and piece by piece the king's quilt grew more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew into her window and perched on her needle. She knew then and there that was the last messenger, so she put the final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. After a long search, she finally found him. The king's royal clothes were now in tatters, and his toes poked out of his boots. Yet his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. The quiltmaker unfolded the king's quilt from her bag. It was so beautiful that hummingbirds and butterflies fluttered about. Standing on tiptoe, she tenderly wrapped it around him. "What's this?" cried the king. "As I promised you long ago," the woman said, "when the day came that you yourself were poor, only then would I give you a quilt." The king's great sunny laugh made green apples fall and flowers turn his way. "But I am not poor," he said. "I may look poor, but in truth my heart is full and bursting, filled with memories of all the happiness I've given and received. I'm the richest man I know." "Nevertheless," said the quiltmaker, "I made a quilt just for you." How beautiful his quilt is. It's got little bits of all the things he gave away. "Thank you," replied the king. "I'll take it, but only if you will accept a gift from me. There's one last treasure that I have to give away. All these years I saved it just for you." And from his rickety, run-down wagon, the king brought out his throne. "It's really quite comfortable," the king said, "and just the thing for long days of sewing." From that day on, the king often came to the quiltmaker's house in the clouds. But by day, the quiltmaker sewed the beautiful quilts she would not sell, and at night the king took them down to town. There he searched for the poorest and downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away. The end. There she is, up in the clouds. And here are some quilts in the back, some quilt patterns. I have a quilt at my house that was made for me, and it's really special. It even has my name sewn into it. I love it so much. It was a wonderful gift. I hope you enjoyed this book. It was a longer book. Did you have to have a snack while you were listening? And I hope that it brought you a smile today. You can see that it brought me lots of smiles to read it to you. And if you need an extra smile right now because you have all those feelings, the good and the bad and the worried and the sad, just remember, a good book will always make you smile. I think always. I mean, I can't promise it, but pretty much always will make you smile. So happy back to school. I hope that you have a great time with your classmates and your friends and of course your really cool teachers. So from big kids going to college, and I know there's a lot of big kids off to college right now. I know a lot of them, to kids just starting kindergarten or first grade or second grade or third grade, whatever grade. Have a happy year and keep reading and keep coming back to listen to more stories. So big reading love from me to you.